someone has asked whether we need special courts to try this kind of thing. So you catch somebody in the act, okay, then you catch the person, this is what you have done, try them. Maybe that is the kind of thing we need, you know, the shock tactics in this part of the world.
Especially since you talked about scapegoating a few people and then letting other people learn from that lesson.
Specifically pertaining to the election, I'm sure you know we have the Electoral Act. The category of offenses specified by that act. And naturally, anyone caught within the ambit of that legislation would naturally face the music. Now, what I'm trying to say specifically is there is no gap, or what we call a lacuna, that maybe we don't know how to handle this. For instance, the issue of a flag that the lady mentioned, that let's say somebody bolted away with this and that. At the tribunal, there's what they call substantial compliance. The question they will ask is, in spite of that, did it vitiate the outcome of the election? That means, will the reasonable man assume that, as a result of this thing that happened, it has affected the fortunes of party X, Y, Z? Or in spite of that, will the results have substantially been the same? Let's say somebody will claim to have a landslide of 62%.
For instance, like what happened to Hillary Clinton in the last time. They said, oh, maybe that whole drama gave Trump the edge.
Thank you. So that's the same thing I'm saying. Let's say, for instance, somebody had a 62%, then lo and behold, another person bolts away with the flag, and in spite of that, they still have a 32%. You won't expect the court to upturn the verdict simply because of that, because it will mean that they are just trying to satisfy the whims and caprices of people, just to feel good. That's what they call it. It has become a court feel good. Because naturally somebody will look at that, okay, if this man has scored a 62% and the other person bolted away with the flag, what has changed? If you bolted with the flag...
Let's put you on pause, Mr. Wonuga, and go back to Dr. Abari. No, I'm sorry. We need to take Dr. Abari at this point, Ken. Dr. Abari, the final question that was asked for this segment had to do with, you know, we talked about fake news from various sources, but this person is talking about the fake news from the government itself.
Yes, directly.
Or, if you prefer, maybe rogue elements within the government, within the government machinery.
They were not aware.
Okay. Now, are you aware of this? And if so, how does government plan to tackle this? Because that's probably having a bigger impact if people think that the information is coming from government, as opposed to it coming from some anonymous blogger or citizen journalist.
Mm-hmm. I think on another note, I can say actually that's some hate speech against the government. But before I answer that question categorically, let me just go back slightly to what we started talking about, regulation. Now, I think in matters of what hate speech and fake news can cause to the environment and to our community and to the nation, it is imperative that we put the large interests of the nation than petty, minor, or restricted partisan concerns. So legislators,
I have to cut in at this point and ask you to address the question. Directly. Because I'm being told that we have just under 2 minutes to the next break. And I want you to address the question before we go on that break.
Which is, what exactly do we do when the fake news comes from government? That's the question.
Government circles.
Yes.
I do not know of any fake news that comes from government side, because government is because I cannot see a responsible government coming out with fake news in order to either bamboozle or to misguide or to misinform the citizens. No responsible government
might have to do with statistics. Let me give you an example. Let me give you an example of something that falls under this umbrella. I remember that not too long ago there was a story about how much was being used by government to feed Sheikh El Zakzaki and his wife while they are in detention. A figure was given for that expense. And people said, look, even if we divide it by the number of days they've spent in detention, there's no way they could have spent X amount on 2 people for that purpose. Now, I don't know what it was about that story that people found difficult to believe. But if indeed the figures that were reported were the figures, and if indeed the calculations that were done were the calculations, it stood to reason that there was something not quite completely correct about the story. And that came directly from a government organization, a government spokesperson, and so on. I use that example not because I believe it's fake news, but because it speaks to the question about statements coming from government. That is perhaps an isolated case, and if you have fact-checked, you will have certainly come to realize that what was said actually is not exactly what was meant to be said. But because it is something which is sensational, because it it catches the fancy, because it is something that can be used that can be used in order to either by opposition or by people to hold government to account, this actually trended for a while. But if the journalist who reported that had fact-checked, would the person to whom the statement was alluded to have come from? You know, I'm sure
Doctor, I just want to understand. Sorry, Dr.
Gabay. Picture would have come out.
Sorry,
nobody had attempted to cross-check.
Yeah, can I just understand what you're trying to say?
Nobody had gone to the person. Nobody had gone to the person who was said to have made the statement.
If you could just give us a minute to clarify what you're trying to ask. Sorry, if you can just give us a minute. The question is, who was not meant to have said what? You said what was said was not what was meant to have said. Is that on the part of the journalist or on the part of the government? I'm a bit confused.
It could have come from either side. It could have either come from the journalist or it have come from the government. But even if it were
Dr. Barry,
the journalist who reported,
Dr. Barry, because of time, Dr. Barry, because of time, I want to take you first in this last round, which is now, as we're winding this down, we want to find out, there's 14 days from now to the elections. What should we look out for so that this phenomenon of fake news does not have a negative impact, does not have any impact, as a matter of fact, on the electoral process? Please.
I am not sure it will have any much impact on the electoral process because this has always been the characteristics of our electoral season. Whenever we are going close to elections, you find that there is an ascendancy in the use of intemperate languages, in the use of in the dissemination of fake news and the hate speeches and hate actions. This has always been the practice, and more so, as you have rightly pointed out at the beginning of this discussion, that fake news has always been there with us. It is only gaining ascendancy as we are going towards the election simply because politicians want to make a political capital out of it. But this is actually not something that Nigerians would actually or will impact on what political decisions Nigerians are going to make eventually. The most important thing to know is that most of these people who actually take joy in disseminating fake news do not seem to know the larger implication of that, because when the effect of fake news breaks out and there is chaos, they will feel that they will be looking at the chaos or monitoring it as it develops from the comfort of their homes. But it is not going to be so. It's going to consume everybody. So it is actually on this note that we are calling on every Nigerian, and especially parents, to keep more than a passing interest on their children, and of course for even adults to understand that there is actually a responsibility that lies on each and every one of us to keep the peace, to ensure that whatever information that goes out there is the type that will not disintegrate society but integrate it, will not cause chaos, will not cause disaffection, will not cause lack of love, and will cause crisis. And will not cause crisis.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Barry. We're running out of time, and I need to give our other guests a minute each to make their final statements. And Larry, how do we look out? What do we look out for when we're looking out for fake news? Someone told me, leave the site and go and check its origin.
Someone said, don't share until you're sure.
Until you're sure. I mean, what kind of pointers can you give both our audience here and those listening at home so that we can avoid this? Starting with you, Ken.
Yeah, when people talk about, complain about fake news, to me, it's a caveat emptor. Buyer beware, reader beware. When a website keeps giving you false information consistently, run away from it. Stop visiting them, because by visiting them, you are still helping them to be in business.
What if it's a pop-up, flash, news flash?
No, it can, if it pops up, it's only when you click that you get there. If it pops up and meanwhile, this is a problem created by technology. And let me also tell you that whatever technology, wait a minute, whatever technology creates,
you can also solve.
Technology solves it. Now, there are also technologies that will help you fact check quickly whether this website is actually fake news website, or whether this particular news has been reported before, whether this video has been doctored. Because there are ways you can check the original version of that video and say, this video is doctored. This is the original video. This is the original picture. So there are ways to find out. Technology has helped us to get to that level.
Larry?
I think for the conventional media, we need to use the tools at our disposal, like reverse Google search, Seeing Eye, and the rest of them, to check some information that goes out in the public. And where we discover that they are not correct, they are fake, we should quickly also use our social media channels to let everybody know that this is fake. Now, for the ordinary citizens out there, the rule should be that do not share what did not originate, from you. Or at least seek, a second
sent as received.
It's also wrong, because at the end of the day, if that information leads to incitement and there is violence, you are going to be culpable. And I think the lawyer here, will confirm. But there's also one aspect we need to look at, and that is the service providers themselves. Facebook and WhatsApp. Now, in Indonesia is one of the countries where you have this problem of fake news. They're going to have their general elections in April this year. And the government of Indonesia has actually been engaging in WhatsApp, because they discovered that a lot of fake news gets spread through WhatsApp. And now they're putting a technology in place in Indonesia where there's a limitation on the number of shares that you can make. That is, if I receive an information and I want to share, they limit it. So where before you used to share up to 10, they reduce to 5. So the idea really would be that the less people get this, the less people believe that. There are also technologies.
No, I'm sorry. I just
we have to stop.
Okay, all right. That is fine. That is fine.
To allow the lawyer have the last word.
Please.
Okay. I think, like I said earlier, it still boils down to law enforcement, because basically, if just a few individuals are fished out, for instance, and at the end of the day, they're able to face the music, like I said, the law takes their course, it's going to be a deterrent to a lot of others, because the issue of sharing shared as a cent doesn't matter. The damage done remains the same. Like they used to teach us in mathematics, is a constant K, to use that language. And when again, I'll just digress, you say, what is the value of X? This is the information I got from this person. I sent it to this person. Oh, that means that one is going to know that. But the damage the news will do will always be there. So basically, you understand, it's time to sit down and say that, okay, let's just get 1 or 2 people and do this. By the time we do this, you understand, people will sit up.
Just we have to make sure that it's not abused, so they're not just picking any random person.
Otherwise, it will be the same thing, to be a recurring decimal.
All right. This kind of discussion can go on for 2 hours, and we won't repeat ourselves.
That's right.
I would have loved to take more questions and comments from the audience, but so quickly, alas, 1 hour is gone. But so let's start with the audience. Thanking you,
so
for joining us on this edition of the of Crime Politics. Let me also thank Dr. Garba Bari of the National Orientation Agency. He's the Director General, for joining us. I hope you didn't feel besieged today at any point,
a little
or feel that we were directing hate speech, as you said, somewhere in between at you. But thank you so much for joining us. You provided us a very critical perspective on today's edition of the program. Mr. Larry Arugudade, Mr. Ken Ubeche, both of you, a veteran journalist, and Mr. Awonuga, of course, is a lawyer. Thank you so much for joining us. We would have benefited from the comments of the president of the Online Magazines Association of Nigeria, Mr. Ejiro Adigbo, because they are at the center of this. But unfortunately, he couldn't join us. But that's it.
Yeah, all I have to say is don't share as received. Check it out.
And don't send as received either.
That's right.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us. Ijoma and I are out.
Bye for now.
Thanks.